Hello everyone, I hope you have all had a really great week and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here and you've just clicked on one of my videos for the first time and you don't know who I am, then I'm Mrs. Smith. I'm a Christian and I walk about in all sorts of nice locations, mainly around Kent in the UK, and I talk about all sorts of things from a Christian point of view. Today I went back to Teston Bridge Country Park. I did do a walk in Teston before, but that time I walked around the outside of the park. This time I'm walking around the park itself. Now, Teston Bridge Country Park is 32 acres in size and it has a lovely river walk. It has a children's play area. It has a refreshment kiosk, toilets, a car park with disabled parking, and it is really lovely and peaceful here. The bridge itself is a 15th century bridge, and the park also includes a large grass area with picnic tables, and it's called Bridge Meadow, and it used to be grazing land, but it opened as a park in 1978, I believe, and the current Teston Lock, where I started my walk here today, has been a lock since 1911, but there has been a lock at Teston since the 1740s. So I really do hope that you enjoy the scenery today. Now, I titled my talk Turn the Other Cheek. Really? Because I've had so many people sort of wind me up over the years by saying things like, you can't get me back, you're a Christian and the Bible says you have to turn the other cheek. But is that really what the Bible says? I want to read to you the two verses in the Christian Bible where the phrase turn the other cheek appears. And yes, believe it or not, turn the other cheek only appears in the Bible twice, even though it is one of the most commonly quoted parts of the Bible by both Christians and non-Christians. So the first time it appears is in the book of Matthew in chapter 5 and in verse 39. And I've got it in front of me and it says, "You have heard it said, eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek also." And in the book of Luke in chapter 6 and verse 29, it says, "If someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to him the other also." You know, both times it was Jesus speaking in something called the Sermon on the Mount, which is where Jesus, on a hill in northern Israel, was explaining to people various ways to live that would be blessed by God and how to live a righteous life. The first group of statements that he made are known as the Beatitudes, and actually I might do a video about that at some point. But as you can see here from the two verses I just read to you, Jesus clearly says that if someone slaps you on the right cheek or on one cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. So what did this mean? Did it mean that as Christians we should allow anyone to treat us as they like? Is Jesus asking us to be doormats for people to walk all over? You know, whenever I come across something in the Bible that I don't quite understand, I always first look at the time it was written and the context in which it was written. I also try to look at the original Hebrew or Greek because, you know, not all Christian translations of the Bible stay as close to the original language as others do, right? And understanding the history and the context of biblical writing, I believe, is vital in order for us to gain real insight into what is actually being said and why it's being said. Otherwise, you know, how can we apply it properly to our lives today? The people listening to Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount weren't just his disciples or his close followers. They most likely included people who were curious about him, and maybe it even included some of his enemies who were listening to him as well. Later verses in Matthew go on to say that the crowds were amazed at what Jesus was teaching, and You know, even today, Christians take the Sermon on the Mount really seriously. Jesus' teachings about our hearts being genuinely transformed instead of us just following a set of rules, or about us living righteously instead of being hypocritical, or about us staying compassionate and respectful, you know, instead of being vengeful or hateful. These things are spoken to and still speak to many, many people today. And it's important to me, as well as a Christian, that I take seriously what Jesus was saying about turning the other cheek. But what was he saying? What was this slap on the cheek all about? In the time that Jesus was preaching his Sermon on the Mount, Israel was a Roman occupied territory. And if the Jews didn't follow out a Roman soldier's request, and that could be anything, to be honest, from getting him a drink of water to giving up their personal belongings to the Roman soldier, right? Then that soldier would often give that Jew a swift, backhanded slap to the right cheek. That was very, very common back then. But why would Jesus tell people to offer their left cheek as well? Well, Roman soldiers tended to be right-handed. And if they hit someone they considered to be an equal, they would often hit with the palm of their right hand. And so their palm would land on the left side of their equal's face. You know, in that culture then, that kind of hit in that way made clear distinctions between the classes. So a Roman soldier would slap a Jew with the back of their hand, which would land on the right side of the Jewish person's face, to make the point that the Romans felt that the Jews were beneath them, or second class. In other words, the Roman slap to the Jew wasn't just an act of aggression, it was an insult to the Jew's dignity. So the Romans always backhanded the Jews as a far more demeaning slap, I guess, the type of slap that a slave might have received back then. So for the Jew to stand their ground, to not break down, to not show emotion, but to simply turn their cheek and offer the other one, would mean the only option for the Roman soldier then would be for him to slap the Jew with the palm of his hand. And that way of slapping was only reserved for those the Romans saw as their equals, right? So the Roman soldier wouldn't have done that. And he wouldn't have backhanded slapped with his left hand either, because that would have been seen as unclean for both of them. Back then, a person's right hand was considered the clean one. It was the one they ate with. And, well, let's just say that their left hand did everything else, okay? So for the Jew to offer his other cheek as well was asserting his dignity. It was showing a kind of brave counter move, if you like, an act of courage, because he knew that the Roman wouldn't slap with his unclean left hand, and he also knew that the Roman wouldn't hit with his right palm, or the Roman would be conceding that the Jew was his equal. It would have been a very humble, non-aggressive response from the Jew against a very oppressive system. And that is what Jesus was saying when he said about turn the other cheek. He was saying, stand up for yourself, but not in an aggressive way. And you know, this is actually how Jesus behaved all of the time when he was being physically and verbally attacked by his enemies. Jesus really did practice what he preached. You see, sometimes, you know, people read a Bible verse like turn the other cheek and they take it out of context. They put their own meaning or their own slant on it, and it ends up becoming something that it was never really meant to be. The people listening to what Jesus was saying at that time would have understood what he was saying perfectly well, because they were part of that culture, right? Whereas today, we probably wouldn't, unless it was explained to us by someone. So, personally, when I read those turn the other cheek verses, I know that Jesus was saying, keep your dignity, stand up for yourself. Just don't go down to their level to do it. I know that God is a God of peace and a God of love, but God is also a God of justice. And he loves us so much that I don't believe he would want us to stay in a situation where we are being mistreated by somebody. God doesn't want us to be pushovers. He knows that there are times when we have to stand up for ourselves. But as Christians, if we are Christians, we should be aiming not to return evil for evil. So personally, I believe that what Jesus was saying was that if someone is attacking your right to have respect or your right to have dignity, although we shouldn't defend ourselves with revenge or with aggression, we can and should stand our ground in a peaceful way and with dignity. So I guess turning the other cheek involves not retaliating in an aggressive way, but instead responding with humility, with dignity, and with courage. I hope you have all enjoyed my video today, and if you have, then please do hit that like button for me, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, because it won't cost you a penny, but it will mean the world to me. And it only takes you a second to do and really, really helps me out. So thank you so much for joining me again today on another walk and talk. But until next time, please do take care and God bless you all. Bye.